Lymph node.
What does a lymph node do?
Okay. Well, okay. Well, I think it's really interesting because I've sat in this class and heard all the things that are going on. Somebody's has had surgery for some kind of cancer, and only one lymph node was affected. But basically, most people don't understand what a lymph node is, and I think it's time that we all understand it a little bit. And the you and we're going to touch on the circulatory system, but probably the best way to define the lymphatic system, that wherever the circulatory system goes, the lymphatic system goes, and it's a not a real well defined structure that you can pick up and analyze. And you probably, ooh, there's a lymphatic vessel. You're not going to do that. And if I feel your neck and I feel nodes here, those are lymph nodes, and usually you get those when you have a upper respiratory infection like that. Most of the people in this class are going to identify lymph nodes with cancer, and this is where the metastatic cells have gone. And this is a unique structure that God has put into this whole being that we are, that, as I said, it goes everywhere in the body. There's no place it does not go. And what is its main purpose? The main purpose is it sends cells, and usually they're mostly lymphocytes. It sends cells to the area of the body that's been invaded either by a disease or by cancer. And most of the time, if you were to pick up some tissue and I told you this is a lymphatic chain from the back, okay. But it's when you feel the nodes, okay, there's a problem here. And unfortunately, you can be told that, okay, she had surgery and they had 10 nodes, but only one of them, had cancer in it. Well, it's a little misleading because if it's in one cell, they can be anywhere. So it's encouraging that there's few of them, but it does not mean that you're out of the woods. Just for a word of comfort on that. But when it comes to spreading of
Rather have 10 nodes positive or 1 node positive?
I'd probably rather have 10 nodes positive. Okay, why would
That's
you?
a no.
Okay, why?
That's because lymph nodes are designed to take fluid basically away from organs, so they're going to be the first place they go. If you've got one lymph node positive in a chain of 10, that's better than having all 10 positive, because it means more than likely it's gone beyond the lymph nodes if all of them are positive.
Well, you're 100% correct, but I know that you always throw me a question that I answered it the opposite way. So. But moving on, thank you though. That the lymph nodes, we've established that. You threw me off. But okay. Now, where do the cells come from that make up the? It's in the lymphatic fluid. Can anybody guess where they come from? What part of the body do they come from? No, you can't. Not you. You're not allowed. Okay, real quick.
Give us a hint.
Huh?
Give us a hint.
Arms? Those are sweat glands. No. Okay. We won't belabor it. It comes from the bones. And okay, I'm not through though.
Okay.
And we're going to talk just briefly on the skeletal system. And the skeletal system produces red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, and other things. And most of this manufacture, there's a group of cells that the bone marrow makes, and the red blood cells carry hemoglobin, which is a protein which carries the oxygen. And the anything in the body that involves an artery or a vein, arteries take blood away from the heart, and they've got a thicker muscular wall, so it's pumping everything out. Veins are thinner, it doesn't have as big a muscular structure, and how does the blood get back to the heart? You got the heart pumping it out, but how does it get back to the heart? Okay, there is no pump to pump the blood back to the heart. Instead, what happens is that the muscles in the legs and the arms, they're contracting, and when they contract, it squishes the blood back towards the heart. And then unique in that system, there's valves in the veins, because once the blood gets past point A, this valve is a one-way valve. It can't go back or regurgitate. When you stop and think, that's amazing. And you probably have seen the British Guard where there are 12 of them standing there and one's out flat. And that was because he was standing at attention and he was not moving his muscles. And he passes out because it's easier for the heart to pump blood this way than this way. So again, a very unique thing. And in the bones themselves, the places, not all the bones produce, have marrow in it, are going to produce all these different cells. The main ones are the sternum, breastbone, your hips, and the long bones, the femur and the tibia, fibula, radius, ulna, and so forth. And there are several different types of white blood cells. There's neutrophils, and neutrophils are the ones kind of cells that come mainly when you get an infection. Monocytes or lymphocytes, you're going to see those more with viral kinds of diseases. Eosinophils, you're going to see that if you got an allergy. So again, we've got a very unique system that's working in coordination with everything else. I think, yeah. Okay, well, let me just briefly run this through, and then I'm going to let you listen to Pete. What a privilege it is for you to be able to listen to him. And he's proud of his humility. So, but and basically, I'm going to describe the heart. And the heart's got 4 chambers. They're called atria, A-T-R-I-A. You've got a right side one and a left side one. And then below those is a ventricles, which is the muscle part of the heart that pumps everything out. And you got a right ventricle and a left ventricle. Now, how does all this blood get to the heart? It comes through what? Blood is coming back to the heart, so they're going to be called what? Veins, right. Okay. And it's interesting how this returns, because it comes through the vena cava, which is a big tube. It's about the size of a garden hose. And all the organs that from here up go into the superior vena cava. Everything below the heart goes into the inferior vena cava. They come together to form the vena cava. And they go into the right atrium, this vessel, this compartment right here. And then, and this is going to be dark blood because it's got carbon dioxide and waste materials in it. And so the blood comes into the upper chamber, right atrium, and then there's a valve there that opens, the tricuspid valve, and it lets it go into the ventricle. Now, where does the blood go once it gets into the ventricle? Huh? And why does it go there? Right, okay. So it goes there, it pulls out. That what?
He says that's the sum total of his knowledge.
Okay, well, then we'll give you still more of an opportunity. So, and the right ventricle then pumps it into the lungs where it picks up the oxygen and returns it to the left atrium, and which again has another valve, and that's the bicuspid valve, and you've all heard of that. And then that blood goes to another valve into the left ventricle, and from there it's shooting it out to the entire rest part of the body. Just briefly, once the aorta itself, again, is the size of a garden hose, ascending aorta comes up like this and curls around like this. But the first 3 or 4 branches off the aorta are coronary arteries. Now, where do they go?
To your liver.
No, not yet. Coronary, where do they go?
He told you, to the heart.
No. Yeah, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. Who said that? Oh,
Yes.
okay. If that was a derogatory statement, I didn't hear it. But anyhow, it goes to the coronary arteries because the heart itself is a muscle. It needs oxygen, and the main one you need. There's 3 of them. Is it a 4th one? I can't remember. This, huh?
You can have it.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
3 primary.
Yeah, but the main one is the LAD, which is a widowmaker, and that's probably, if you lose 80% of that, you may not be long with us. And so it's providing that. And then the main blood flow for this is going into the rest of the aorta, which is taking it to the liver, the spleen, the gastrointestinal tract, wherever that blood needs to go, which is everywhere, including the brain. But there's also provision for that too. And just a minute, Pete.
Priorities.
Yeah, there are 2 carotid arteries, one on each side, that pumps the blood up into the brain, and eventually it ends up in the brain. It's called the circle of Willis, and this is where the aneurysms can occur, and that's where you can have a stroke because the circle of Willis has got an aneurysm and ruptures. And I think, in brief, that I've gotten you there, and Pete's going to tie everything together with the other stuff.
I will try. Is this working? Okay. That was a brief picture of how complex the heart is, but it's much, much more complex than that. Mainly because of the input of the nervous system. Now, at what point in your life is your heartbeat the fastest? 2 times. Resting heart rate, when is it the fastest? 2 times. When you enter this world and when you leave this world. When is the time that your heartbeat is the lowest? No, just in general, resting heart rate is when you're in your mid-30s, when you're supposedly the most physically fit. Anybody want to guess a normal heart rate? Just give me a baseline. 70 is good. And between 60 and 80 can be a normal resting heart rate. Anybody want to make a guess the lowest resting heart rate and who had that? $38. Will Chamberlain had a resting heart rate of 38. What group of athletes have the lowest heart rates? Even better than that.
Swimmers.
No. Soccer players. Most physically fit athlete there is. They have resting heart rates in the 40s. Now, why is that important, you ask? Okay. It's important because there's this thing called homeostasis, which is a balance between opposing forces. So to get a resting heart rate, you have to have a balance between the sympathetic system we talked about
earlier, which raises your heart rate, and the parasympathetic, which lowers it. So it's constantly monitoring this. So first of all, as Bob said, the heart is a pump. That's its primary function. But what are the processes by which this becomes an efficient pump? Anybody want? Some of y'all have had cardiac outputs, right? Figured. If you've ever had a cardiac workup, they'll talk to you about an echo and cardiac output. Cardiac output is basically the efficiency at which your heart pumps out blood. So your heart pumps out about around 60% is a good, because you have to fill it, you have to fill the chambers, and you have to pump it out. So if you get 60% of that out, you're in good shape. If you get into congestive failure and stuff, you're down around 30%. The maximum you can do is probably 75 to 80, and that's a well-conditioned athlete. Now, if you happen to have been a smoker or you are a smoker, what are the two best occupations to have? Now, this is for males. It's a crazy question, but it's a little piece of that trivia to know. You want to be a conductor? You want to be a conductor of an orchestra, or you want to be a longshoreman? Now, what do those two people have in common? You are correct. So anything males do that is upper body exercise, and here's another plug for golf, you want to do as much upper body exercise as you can, and the older you get, you need to do more. So
I get lots of that.
upper body exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Doing what?
Well, some people take 4 times they hit the ball to get there. I take 8.
True. That is the absolute truth. Yeah, it's sort of hit the ball, drag Bob. Hit the ball, drag Bob. No, that's not true.
No, it is true, unfortunately.
Let's see, where was I going with it? Oh, yeah. So it is important for this upper body exercise. It's important to keep your heart toned. The heart only uses, it's called aerobic, so it only can use oxygen. It under extreme duress will use what's called anaerobic, but it doesn't like it. So you want to do everything you can, like walking regularly, upper body exercise. This is really important. Now, what's the other thing the heart does besides pump blood to all these vital organs, especially the brain? What else does it do? It regulates blood pressure. So what factors determine your blood pressure? This is important. Well, the force of the contraction would do it, but you pump it into an elastic system, which are the arteries, so you get this forward pulse, the arteries expand, and then they'll contribute to that. So the blood pressure is basically controlled by the heart, by the volume it ejects, and the resistance of the peripheral vascular system. So now this is when it becomes exceedingly more important and complex. So if you've ever been singing in a choir, you've been standing, and you begin a series of long songs where you increase your chest, you may have to hold a note or something like that. It's a great time to pool blood in your legs. So what do you do to compensate for that? You should be able to move around. But if you're up in front of a lot of folks and you can't move, and you add a little heat to the situation, what happens? Your blood pressure drops, right? All right, so I got to get a plug in for this too. If you come upon a person who has passed out, what do you check first? Pulse. All right, what will the pulse tell you if you're alive? Yeah, check see if you're alive. That's true. So what will the pulse tell you? It'll tell you 2 things. One, what 2 things will it tell you? It's either low. Yeah, alive is good. But it'll either be low or it'll be high. So those are 2 different ways to faint. So why if your heart rate was high would you faint? Well, if your heart starts pumping so fast, and those of you who experience atrial fibrillation or premature atrial contractions, which all of us can do, you notice as your heart rate gets up, you start to get lightheaded. So the faster the heart contracts, the less likely it is to fill. So the filling goes down. If the filling goes down, you have less blood to pump out, so you can faint from too rapid a heart rate. So usually you got to get between 150 and 180 to do that. So if your heart rate's up there, you've got either a primary atrial problem or you've got something overstimulating the heart. Whereas the other way around is if you drop your heart rate, so now it becomes what we call bradycardia instead of tachycardia. The bradycardia can be due to parasympathetic overload. In other words, if you extremely nauseated and you get pale and diaphoretic from the nausea, it's
Sweaty.
sweaty. You have this massive parasympathetic outflow from the base of the brain through the vagus nerve, and then it just vasodilates everything. So you've been nauseated, right? So what accompanies nausea? Usually dizziness. Have you ever gotten violently dizzy, and what accompanies that? Nausea. So how does that work? Well, it works because those two nuclei are in the brain stem, and they're very close to each other. So if you overstimulate one, you get it spread into the other. So if you stimulate your nausea, you're going to have it spread into so where you'll begin to get dizzy. That's in the vestibular center. And if you overstimulate the vestibular center, then you're going to get nauseated. That's the physiology.
Just a quick question. If you're hot and dehydrated, overheated and dehydrated and climb some steps, and you feel lightheaded,
Yes.
Is that the faster or slower part?
It's probably faster because if you decrease blood volume, which you do because you're dehydrated, and you're going upstairs, which increases your heart rate. And if you're hot, you're going to vasodilate. All three of those things are going to make the heart rate go faster. And if the heart rate gets above a certain rate, you start to feel lightheaded. So what do? Your body tells you to sit down, right? So that's what you do. You sit down. So anyway, back to the person on the floor who was unconscious. You check the pulse. It's going slow. Then you start looking for cardiac sources. If you find them on the floor and the pulse is rapid and thready and they appear sweaty, then you can be pretty sure they had a diaphoretic or sweating effect from the parasympathetic system. So anyway, neither one of them is good for your brain, but your body wants you to stay flat regardless, because even if your heart is pumping out at, say, 50, your blood pressure is 50, as long as you're horizontal, like Bob said last week, you can get blood to your brain. So don't pick them up. Leave them in the position, elevate the legs, and all of that will help the return. Let's see, where else have we got? Anybody know about the broken heart syndrome? You ever heard about the broken heart syndrome?
Yes.
Spouse passes away, and within a year, you may pass away, particularly if it's been a very good relationship. Anybody familiar with that? It used to kind of be hinted at, but some of the Japanese researchers and a lot of other people have done it, and they find out that, well, what you already know is that women are basically better at handling these things. So females have about twice the rate of death within the first year after they lose a spouse. What do you think it is for males? 6 to 1, 6-fold increase. And something happens to the end of the heart. You get a little atony, or for some reason
What's happening?
atony, it's atrophy, weakness.
Oh, I thought you said
Atone.
apnea.
No, atony,
Huh?
lack of tone.
Lack of tone. Okay.
You can get you can get it in any muscle in the body. But anyway,
I really knew that, but I'm not sure
so
they
you
did.
get what's called a dilatory cardiomyopathy. It's treatable, but you have to recognize that that's a real thing. For a while, it used to just be said, no, they will themselves for that to happen, but it doesn't. Apparently, grief is such a powerful, powerful reaction. It has untold effects on the human body. So it's just kind of be aware of that. It's really, really important to know. All right. You got anything else?
No, you're doing
How about
fine.
questions? Yes, sir.
I'm not sure how I'm gonna ask this, but I'm in fasting. That's an attempt to get closer to God. I've never really thought about the medical implications of fasting. But can y'all just go with that?
Yeah.
As a question?
You familiar with wrestlers? Sweating to make weight. They dehydrate themselves. Sometimes they would take diuretics, get in a sweatsuit so they'd lose a lot of volume. That can produce some severe physiologic changes. So fasting you have to be a little careful with. By fasting you mean no water either. The older you get, the riskier that gets. is if you're already having a little trouble with electrolyte balance because you haven't been eating things or you're on certain medications, which like diuretics, which cause you to lose potassium, you got to be really careful when you fast.
Go along without food and water.
Yes, yes. Probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks, depending on how much you store. You know, that's why you gain an extra 10 pounds, right? You didn't know that? Nature and God in His infinite wisdom to help us with diabetes, with diseases, allows you to put on 10 extra, actually. But you're gonna get, as you start to break down fat, that's what you're metabolizing when you do Atkins. You're not taking any carbohydrate. And so you kind of go into really a sort of a prolonged odd sort of fast where you're only eating fats, basically. Produces ketones, which the body can use instead of glucose or your glycogen stores. And we used to use it when we had no medications for seizures. If we put you on a ketogenic diet in kids, we were able to slow the frequency of seizures by just having less glucose available and more ketone. And the ketone itself would suppress cortical activity. It's a lot more complex than that, but just to give you an idea of some of the things that the body can do.
You explained about the vagus nerve, but could you explain that again, how that works?
It's basically the parasympathetic system, so it stops things on the. If you think of sympathetic as stimulating and parasympathetic as non-stimulating, so if you stimulate your sympathetic system, your blood vessels constrict. That protects you in a fight or flight situation. It increases the contractions of the heart, increases the heart rate, whereas the parasympathetic system decreases the peripheral constriction, decreases heart rate, decreases what's called the ionotropic way the heart does it, so the heart is not as effective when it contracts. So that's one of the things we worry about a little bit when people are having coronary disease and having a heart attack, is that it massively stimulates the vagus nerve because you get nauseated, you get this cold, clammy sweat, you get the referred pain in the parasympathetic distribution. So it's not necessarily a good thing. So when Bob talked about the LAD, or the left anterior descending artery, being a widowmaker, if that thing closes off and you don't have collaterals and you haven't been doing aerobic kind of exercises, then you get a massive vagal discharge. So anyway, the vagus just controls all the function of the GI tract and the bladder and a few other important areas.
Why do some people faint easily?
You familiar with fainting goats? Have you seen those? What's the thing that happens to the goat to trigger it? You startle them. So it's an exaggerated startle reflex. This vasovagal response in some people I guarantee it's inherited. If you see the sight of blood and you faint, there's nothing you can do about it. It's been there since birth, and you can't make yourself not do it. Now, most women get through childbirth pretty good because, in spite of that, even if you are afraid of blood. It's not afraid of it, it's just the sight of it triggers this fear response. Then you get the massive vagal discharge and then you faint. The idea is it puts you flat and protects you. You're familiar with a possum, playing possum? That's a fear response. There was a whole class of people that we studied from Maine called the Jumping Frenchmen of Maine. And if you, seriously, if you touch them like this, they'd have this exaggerated startle response. They'd have a massive vasovagal response, and they'd pass out just like those goats did. So is it protective? Probably, but today it's not really very effective. So, if you were being charged by something larger than yourself that was intent on eating you and you passed out, sometimes it wasn't as much fun for them if they'd already eaten. So probably, you know how your cat plays with whatever it cats? Well, that's it. If it's full, it's not going to do it. It's just going to play with it. So if you conk off, maybe it'll leave you alone. some crazy stuff.
Can you talk just for a minute about prolonged stress and what that does?
Nothing good.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's probably what's at the center of the called Broken Heart Center. It's got a couple of Japanese names associated with it now, but that's prolonged stress. That's not sleeping, not eating properly, just this constant release of adrenaline, which is what what fear and stress does to you. It really squeezes those adrenals. How you avoid that? I really don't know. Cost me a heart attack and 5 stents, and I knew it was causing it.
Are there any diets, bad diets out there that you consider dangerous to the family?
Do you know that the only country in the world that has a new diet every January is U.S.? When you talk to Frenchmen or Italians about diets, they look at you like you're crazy. Why would you do that? Okay. The answer is yes. If you do some of these severe things, you're going to get in trouble. If you get super Atkins, for example, and you get so to the point where you have liked what it's done, you've lost 30 or 40 pounds, and you can't stop the Atkins diet, you can get into trouble. So that's why they started in those diets now. They started programming a day where you can have a cheat day. So it's important for you to get carbohydrate in. Because if you get in a stressful situation, having been on the Atkins diet, and you require glycogen to get out of the situation, you don't have any. It's all been depleted in the liver. There's none left in the muscle. So you got to use a little common sense. I think the latest thing now is is what's called a keto diet or ketogenic diet, which is just a variation of Atkins. People writing cookbooks on it. They're doing crazy stuff like thousands of pounds of coconut oil a week, and what's the other stuff? I think
The byproduct of that could be kidney stone.
you betcha. Any diet is the byproduct is a kidney stone, particularly.
Camel Curl and I went to a church where we had a good friend named Hazel Harrison.
Yeah.
Weighed about 220 pounds. On the 90th birthday, I said, Hazel, when are you going to lose some weight? She said, the last 3 doctors that told me to lose weight are all dead.
And she's right. She's right. You know that.
My question is, do some people just carry weight better?
Yeah, you got to thank your parents for that and the genetics that you get.
Genetics.
Right. What you really need to think about diet is this. You have these extraordinary taste buds. Now, if you happen to have migraines, you got really extraordinary taste buds. Does anybody know that? Who has migraines besides me? Okay. You also got a higher IQ. It's true. For some reason, if you're cursed with the migraine gene, you get a little boost in IQ. Migraines are my favorite subject, so I'm going to digress here a minute. Migraines have, for the longest time, if you even go back in the literature, they make fun of you for having migraines. Judy, when you get into a part of the Count of Monte Cristo, they disparage migraines in the passage. They're also making fun of Italian food, but so you had to take it as where was it? Oh yeah, migraine. Migraine is an interesting disorder. It's the first thing written in medical literature was about migraines. They believe that we're demons in your head trying to get out. Well, it feels like that. But the good news about migraine is that number one, you got a better barometer in your head than you could put on your desk. Most migraineurs can tell when the weather's going to change. You're exquisitely sensitive to seismic kind of things. You remember you hear about animals that go to higher ground when the tsunami's coming? That's seismic. They're feeling that through their extremities. Human beings can do the same thing if you have migraines. My daughter was in Tokyo when she was in school and studying, and she was the only one that left the hotel when she felt the earthquake. So, and she said it was kind of funny. She was out in the middle of the street, and apparently the Japanese slept through it. But the kids who have migraines felt it. You feel the tremor. So anyway, it probably was helpful when you lived in caves, and you know, if you could feel the tremor a little bit, you knew to get out. But anyway, those of you who have migraine are long suffering. No one really understands it. You know, so you get blamed for having migraines. All my life I was told it was something I was doing. But I noticed that my mother had them and my grandmother had them. And, you know, she'd lie in a dark room, tie a rag around her head, and ask kids not to walk by because the vibrations on the floor made her headache worse. But if you ask her if she had a migraine, you know what she'd say? I do not have migraines. I have sick headaches, which apparently was more acceptable than having migraines.
So, going back to your comment about most diets cause kidney stones, did I hear that correctly?
It's if you get dehydrated with it. Yeah, and if you, you know, like I was saying about your taste buds, it's important. It'll tell you when you need water. You have a great thirst mechanism if you don't override it. And you have a great taste mechanism. It'll tell you when you need salt. There is no species alive that won't seek salt. No species. And human beings should, you know, I often recommend putting a salt block in the middle of the table. And when you need salt, just go for the salt block. Because the less smart animals seem to have no trouble maintaining their salt. That was one of the, it used to be a tenet of medicine, but you got to get salt out of your system. You know, we got to put you on these big-time diuretics, and it's going to make your blood, well, it did, but it totally contracted your blood volume, and if you were in an emergency situation, that was good. But for the most part, you need to eat salt, and your body will tell you when you need salt. It'll also tell you when you need water. Who's a fan of 8 glasses of water a day? Why?
Will it tell you when you need sugar?
Actually, it will.
Good, 'cause I responded.
Right. Just this last physiology question. Why do you drink 8 glasses of water a day? Water is odorless, tasteless, and colorless. So how can water taste good? No, it doesn't. It's because you need water. But why 8 glasses a day? Anybody ever figured out why it was 8 glasses a day?
They said so.
Who said so?
They
Who is they?
is.
I used to have to deal with this question a lot because as you get older, and especially if you're on medications that cause you to lose salt, like diuretics, and you continue to drink 8 glasses of water a day, even if you put a lemon in it, I would admit patients to the hospital with what's called delusional hyponatremia and seizures. Your sodium goes down below 120 and you start seizing, only from drinking water, okay? The diet people have you drink water because you fill your stomach up, you get nauseated, and you don't eat. There's nothing magic about it. Who remembers the Cambridge diet? Oh, it was a big thing in the 70s. You buy this big bottle of Cambridge, absolutely guaranteed to lose weight. Just put a cup full of this stuff in water, stir it up, or you could put it in skim milk, and guaranteed weight loss. Does anybody have any idea what was in that? When we finished World War II, we had all this stored casein, which is milk protein, in big, huge contractions. The Cambridge people got that stuff, and it probably cost them 25 cents a unit to put in there, and that's it. They put a little flavoring, either vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry. And you paid $20 a can for that. Now, you did lose weight because there are no calories in it. There are absolutely no calories. So they gave credit to this, the diet, but it didn't do it. And as you say, a lot of folks got into trouble with kidney stones and stuff when you do that. The food pyramid is completely flipped now. We used to tell you carbohydrates good, fats and bad, protein somewhere in the middle. Now it's totally flipped. So you want to eat the good fats. What are the good fats? What? All right. Eggs are good for you in moderation. Butter is better than margarine any day of the week. The oils you want to use, the monounsaturated oils, the best is olive oil. You can use the other oils if you want, but you're not gonna get any better than olive oil. Olive oil's been a part of our diet for thousands of years. Grapeseed oil may have been a part of our diet for how long? Maybe 10 years. Okay. So anyway, your body needs those things. So use the good oils. Safflower plus minus. Yes, sir.
You said last week that cells are glued together with gluten.
Mhm.
Is that the same gluten that's in the last 10 years or so is taboo, causes celiac disease and all that? What is the difference?
Does not cause celiac disease, categorically. If you have celiac disease, then you are gluten intolerant. Now, who has celiac disease? Anybody know? Are you of Mediterranean extraction?
Went there once.
All right. The only people who have true tropical sprue, which is the problems with gluten, you have to be of northern Mediterranean descent, either Italian, Greek, and some Albanians. You got to have that in your background. That's true gluten intolerance. Gluten is what bread is. You all going to give up bread? What is gluten-free bread anyway? It's awful. So anyway, just it's common sense. You can be sensitive to gluten. It's possible if you were never exposed to it when you were younger, it's a problem. But bread is the staff of life. It's been that way. It's been an integral part of our diet for thousands of years. So anyway.
Why was it not a problem for some people for thousands of years? Or was it?
Because it's not a problem. Sorry. Yes.
Why do you think there's so many allergies? Tree nuts, peanuts, all those things.
Okay.
Than there seem to used to be.
Okay. It's a disease of Western civilization. What I mean by that? You don't let your kids get dirty. Whole new school now that they don't bathe the kids when they're born now for 24 hours so they can get the normal gut bacteria to populate the gut. If you're born by cesarean section, you've got a lower population of gut. If you're born premature, that gut biome has to be developed again. If you're exposed to peanuts early in your life, while you still have maternal antibodies, you're probably not going to have peanut allergies. It's because it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. If you're worried about your kid having peanut allergies and you don't give them peanuts, they never get exposed to it. So later in life, when they don't have the maternal antibodies, they haven't done it. That's the current thinking about peanut allergies. There's going to be one or two people who are going to have true peanut allergies no matter when they got exposed to it. But the majority of peanut allergies are probably Western civilization problems. Yes, sir.
Oh, is it me?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I have a question about high blood sugar and diabetes
Mm-hmm.
and its effect on the circulatory and the heart system. I didn't really associate those two until recently. I read something a year or so ago, and I just wanted to elaborate.
Yeah, it's thought to high sugars and high hemoglobin A1C is what the offender is. Tend to be associated with microcapillary damage, so distally in your hands and feet, the capillaries are affected first, that impairs the circulation to those areas. It also begins to affect the ends of nerves, so diabetic neuropathies always start out way out in the extremities and progress proximally. So it has to do with just the high sugars producing hemoglobin A1C, and it's toxic to the nerve.
Can I follow up on that just a second? Another question. It is so hard to find fresh fruits and vegetables when I go on a trip or something on the road. All these, would it kill them to have like a serving of fresh spinach along with the French fries?
No, probably not.
I mean, I just wondered, because that's not a
What do you attribute the increase in height of the Japanese people?
Protein?
Correct. What kind of protein?
McDonald's.
You are correct. So, if you see populations that are extremely short, they're going to have diets low in protein. So the true vegans that start like the Indians who start are very small people. If you want to reach your full human potential, you're going to have to put protein in there. So the average height of Cro-Magnon, for example, was 6'2", a lot bigger than we are today. But that was it consisted mainly of mammoth, ox. Okay. As far as your fruits go, your fruit doesn't care whether it's dried or not. So if you're concerned about it, just take dried fruit. What did people do before we had refrigeration? They dried their fruits, right? And we ate fruit seasonally. We ate eggs seasonally when people produced eggs. We didn't not people, but chickens produced eggs. We didn't domesticate all of those things until much later in our history, dietary history. So we've got a system that's basically designed to be an omnivore. If you want to read a great book, read something called The Omnivore's Dilemma. Great book. Anyway.
Talk a little bit about cramping, hand cramps, leg cramps. I mean, I've tried to read what causes it.
It's basically an unhappy muscle. Muscles have interlocking fibers like this, so when you go to contract it, it does like this, and then you're totally dependent on it relaxing. Well, sometimes it won't relax. What keeps it from relaxing? If your potassium is extremely low, you will cramp. If you over-exercise a muscle that hasn't been exercised and you build up lactic acid in the muscle, it will cramp.
How about magnesium?
Plus minus.
Mustard is the best thing for cramps.
No.
Mustard works.
The best thing for cramps. If you want a homeopathic treatment for cramps, I like mustard, but I wouldn't take it for cramps.
Okay, I'm going to have to.
I'm gonna finish one more. I'm gonna finish this.
Okay, one more question after Sheila.
Well, can I answer that one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. If you want to treat those cramps, it's basically muscles that have not been doing what you ask it to do. I talked to somebody earlier today who's up and down on a ladder, and he got terrific cramps at night. When I used to go to Argentina and bird hunt, that first day of jumping up and down that night, I'd have terrific cramps. Finally figured out if you had a gin and tonic and got rid of the gin, the tonic works. So quinine will reduce. So if you take 2 ounces of quinine water, if you've had a particularly vigorous day, if you've walked, say, 5 miles that day on shopping or on vacation, and you've been overnight on an airplane, for example, getting there, great time to have cramps. So like I said, just have 2 or 3 ounces of quinine water, and or tonic water, and you'll be fine.
Okay.
It's just.
Sheila. I'm Cornelia. I'm sorry.
They tell you how much they have grown and how happy they are that their statue now is much, they're about a half a foot taller. And I asked why, and they said, oh, it's the rice. And it's
Try a whole rice
and
diet.
then they try to say that people of the northern part of China are taller than the people of the lower part of China. And I remembered reading about Lottie Moon, who was 4'8", and she said that God built her to be a missionary in China because she was so short that she fit in with the Chinese. And now they will say, we don't grow people that short anymore. So I thought that was fascinating that they think it's the rice. And
A lot of protein in rice, is there?
Uh-huh.
No. What was the average height of a female in 1776? United States. Less than 5 feet. What was the average height of a male? John Adams, for example. He was 5'2". Washington was a giant because he was 6 feet tall. What was the common denominator in all of that? Diet and protein. Okay, so societies that increase their protein intake are going to get taller. If you insist on being a total vegan, you're going to get smaller. If you want to be a vegan, eat meat the first half of your life. Add the vegan part afterwards.
How about a big round of applause for these two doctors?
David, I want to make 2 points. One is a point, and the other is FYI. And I've thought several times about the FYI, but I'm going to give it to you anyhow. And that's basically because we're an aging group, and if we ourselves aren't aging, we've got family around us that are aging. And I've sat in this room long enough and have personally observed this. This is what happened, that we are maturing in the 60 to 80 age group. And we have a lot of osteoporosis, osteopenia that is occurring in the United States right now. 1/4 of the patients I see have at least osteopenia, if not osteoporosis.
Why is that?
Mhm.
Why is that?
Mostly because they're not getting enough calcium or vitamin D.
Could it be they're getting older?
Yeah, they are, but we can reverse that too. Yes, I can. I have.
You want to atrophy jawbones and a few things like that.
But let me continue. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is these women that become osteopenic or osteoporotic, they're like me, that we don't have good balance. We fall. When we fall, we fracture our hips. And we've got an excellent orthopedist not with us today, and he would testify to this, that the surgery for it is simple. But 30% of people that have osteoporosis and sustain a hip fracture will die within 5 years of their complication. And the complication is because they have the surgery is successful, and then they're put in a nursing home for rehabilitation, and that's parentheses around the rehabilitation. Most people have a hard time using a bedpan, and so then the next thing that they do, they have a catheter, and then the catheter does not get the appropriate care and treatment hygienically. And then the next thing we have is that the patients get cystitis, which is a bladder infection. Then it becomes an ascending infection. It goes to the kidneys, and they get kidney disease. And then once they get to the kidney disease, then they get into sepsis. And the next thing, usually once you get into sepsis, 8 to 10 days, they're going to die. So basically, the point I'm trying to make, that if you or your loved ones are involved in this process, look at the treatment that they're receiving in the hospital, because most of the time they're not in a hospital, they're in a nursing home, and the aseptic treatment is not very good. So that's something you want to be cautious of. And then this all started out because we wanted to make a case for intelligent design. And I want Nancy we started this, I wanted to close with the scripture, and that concludes us.
Yeah, this is the same one I read last week. Psalm 139, 13 through 16. Oh yes, you shaped me first inside, then out. You formed me in my mother's womb. I thank you, high God. You're breathtaking. Body and soul, I am marvelously made. I worship in adoration. What a creation. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made, bit by bit, how I was sculptured from nothing into something. Like an open book, you've watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. All the days of my life, all prepared before
summed up.
Can I thank the class?
Yeah.
I'd like to thank all of you for listening. It's not often I get to get on the soapbox anymore. So I appreciate, I really appreciate you listening.
Thank you. All right, let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Father, we just thank you so much.